introducing what we would call an associate degree program, where 2 or 3 year trained engineers could enter the workforce and carry out some of the work that engineers, the 4 year trained professional engineers, would do. These engineers would be working not on the planning stage but on the operational stage. The professional engineers will be in charge of all projects. But there is a lot of work at site, we believe, and many of our member companies also believe, whereby people, engineering graduates but not professional engineers, could fulfil a role at many of our mine sites. The issues, however, we have identified rest more with the companies. Our companies are going to have to change the way they actually work. They're going to have to restructure their entire workforce if they are to adopt this associate professional degree program. That is the approach that we're looking at. We'll be putting an enormous amount of work into that over the next 2 years to see if we can make it work. Most of our member companies have signed on to working on this particular type of program, but it is Australia's approach on a national basis to try to solve the skill shortage, which cannot be met internally within the country. One thing I did forget to say was that all the modelling work that we've done on the new student intake into universities and the final graduate output after about 4 years is that it is plateauing in Australia, and we cannot see, given all the other issues that are in play within Australia's education system, any way really of changing that. That is why we've had to look at a new way of addressing the skills shortage problem. So Jim, is it enough? I hope.
Thank you, Kevin. As I say, we'll have more opportunity for question discussion and questions from the floor a little bit later on. I should also add that, as most of you know, we do an annual survey through our society of both intake and graduate numbers, and later in the meeting I'll present the latest results from that survey, addressing again this supply-demand issue across our member universities. Okay, so we'll move on and now ask Hans if he would say a few words.
Thank you very much, Bruce. I'd like to go back 15 years, 1996. That's when I left more or less the industry and joined the academia, not from the research point, but from the more organizational point and internationalization point. And the first thing, I became a member of SOMP in 1996 in Moscow. And if I look back 15 years, both for SOMP and how the programs at universities were organized, I can notice a tremendous change. In 1996, the majority of the members of the Society of Mining Professors were Europeans. It was managed from Europe. It was 80% European. If you look now, it's the other way around. So over the 15 years there has been a tremendous internationalization taking place. The same with the university programs. When I joined Delft University, most universities only had their own program, and occasionally a student would move to another university for a semester for exchange. But structurally there was not much around, and in those 15 years we started the European programs. First as an economical measure, because it became very difficult to teach to small numbers of students within the university structures, which demanded more and more larger groups to make it financially feasible. And then it soon appeared that it was filling a need as well to produce engineers who were more international than just from the local programs. And the same, Canada and Chile did cooperations. That started only in the last 15 years. What not changed, I think, very much or not dramatically was the curriculum, the items, contents of the curricula. And I think we're at the point now, and we've had discussions with Rio, and Rio talks about the mine of the future, and it's something totally different than the mines which were developed 15 years or longer ago. They're looking at mass underground block caving mines to produce the same amount of copper from their open pits. And they're looking at investments of $10 billion and more for one mine, with a lead time of 15 to 20 years, which is about a major part of somebody's career. So I think we have to realize that curricula might have to be changed, and with FAMP, with the European programs, we're just at the point that we are going to start at. You know, there's such a tremendous change. If you look now at Rio, and you know, they realize their needs for thousands of engineers in the future, not only mining but also other engineers. In 1996, I talked in London to the head of HR about that we were starting FAMP, and you know that the graduates would be of interest to Rio Tinto, and he said, "No, thank you. I'm very happy that we never had to hire a significant amount of people from outside the UK, and we would like to keep them like that." So you can see how things changed. I think that's.
Thank you, Hans. Mario.
Okay, thank you. I will talk a bit about the experience in South America, and probably more than technical competences. What we are facing, as I mentioned before, is all these social problems. So we have to train now our new graduates more on things like social responsibility, mine closure, and environmental aspects of mining. And the other part, having so many foreign mining companies working here with many expatriates, is the problem of cultural adjustment. And around 50% of the expatriates leaving the country before 1 year is mainly because of cultural adjustment. And that not only means the cultural adjustment of the engineer or the professional, it's also the family. So that's something that mining companies are looking at. I work for a multinational company and I have worked abroad, and for example, when I was promoted to general manager in Colombia, the company didn't sign the contract before my wife said, I agree in going, and she had been over there. Well, the other thing is that competition for talent is becoming global. Right now we have mining companies looking for mining engineers all over the world. 30% of the graduates at PUCP find their first job abroad, mainly in Chile and in Australia. English is a must, but also for English-speaking graduates, it's an advantage to know some other language. For example, Spanish or Portuguese if you want to come to work in this part of the world. We look more towards what we call the soft competences, teamwork, ambition. There is also a need of specialization. It's impossible to have a young graduate that knows in deep every aspect of mining, but in Peru we have so many universities that what we are trying is to have each school specialized in one aspect of mining. Of course, industry support is needed. That is not very strong here. It's stronger in other countries, like for example Australia or Canada. But the mining industry in South America is becoming aware that if they don't get involved with mining education, there will be much bigger problems in the future. Something that I would like to announce also is, and probably Antonio will talk a bit more about that, is that the Peruvian Institute of Mining Engineers ordered a survey for this convention that will be presented. Antonio knows more about that. It's a survey that made to the mining industry on the requirements the mining industry in Peru sees that new graduates need. What I'll do, I know that is in Spanish, I don't think it is in English, but what I will do in my university, is translate it into English and send it to you later. There is a skill shortage, of course. And what we are doing here is, first of all, is to increase the age of retirement. That is one of the issues. The other one is to increase mobilization within the industry. I mean, if to be promoted, it took 3, 4, 5 years. Now it's going to be 2 or 3 years. And the other thing is to try to get back into industry people that have left. That is not such a problem in mining, but in geology, for example, when we had this crisis in the late 2008, you know, the first thing that mining companies did was to get rid of exploration, and a lot of geologists just left the business. And then when the boom comes back, it's very difficult to get these people back into the business. Okay, I think that's enough for right now.
Thank you, Mario. Now to hear from both our professional organisations, and to say John Murphy from SME is with us.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and SME is well represented at this meeting. We're happy to have the SME board and our executive director, Dave Caniglia, here as well. So let me begin by adding a little bit to the anxiety about workforce availability. There's a study that's being completed in the U.S. that's been supported by SME and a number of other organizations, looking at the need for and availability of workers in terms of the overall mining workforce. And they've looked at the availability, future availability in terms of entry-level and more senior positions, and try to assess how we can meet the demand that's been identified. Just briefly, in terms of a few statistics that relate to that study, that in terms of the general workforce, that they're forecasting by 2019 of 49,000 people departing, and that's 21% of the workforce. And in terms of senior workers, highly technical workers, 52% of the workforce by 2029. If you add turnover to the retirement, which the previous numbers were based on retirement predictions, it's even worse. And so we're looking at, in the most optimistic scenario, replacing well over 60% of the workforce in that time frame. In addition to that, as you've heard from some of the other speakers here, there's certainly competition for U.S.-produced trainees from Australia, Mexico, and Canada primarily, but certainly not exclusively. So this certainly brings implications in terms of both labor sourcing, as well as, I would suggest to you, important issues like health and safety, because as many of you have seen from prior studies, a younger, less experienced workforce brings some significant health and safety implications. From an industry perspective, both in terms of design of facilities and operation, just briefly, and some of the other speakers have mentioned some of these points, we certainly will continue to face more challenging geological conditions. We certainly see greater variability in geology and mineralization. Environmental standards continue to increase. I mentioned the health and safety. And I think the other thing that's important is, I think in this industry and this profession, we continue to see more multidisciplinary teams in terms of specialists working together. And I think this has important implications in terms of training engineers. So, while we need to continue to develop engineers that have the requisite core competencies, I think it's important that both as trainees and as professionals, they need to have access to resources.